Hey, 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 and welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? Listen, today's show is going to be a fantastic show. I'm excited. If you guys don't know, today's show is all about yummy snacks, worms. Who likes to eat worms? Like, when you're smaller, you saw them on the floor and you're thinking, you're like, you might be thinking, Chuck, what are you talking about? Well, I got a good friend coming on right now. He wrote a book, Worms Are a Yummy Snack. Yeah, really. Let's check it out. Let's go. Without further ado, let's bring him on to the show.
Good morning. Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm good. And you?
Man, today is a good day, man. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we're alive, right? Can't complain about that.
All my viewers are looking at you right now, seeing the diplomas on the wall, thinking worms are yummy. Like, what is he, a health physician? Was he what? Eating worms? Like, what to do for our body? Like, what is he talking about?
Yeah. So yeah, it was definitely, believe it or not, I actually crowdsourced that title. It was between several different titles, and that's the one that most people chose. So funny enough, that's partly was originally recommended by my wife, but the group collectively said, no, we want to go with that one. I think more because it stood out compared to some of the other ones.
All right. So let's not confuse anybody much longer. We are talking about his book. All right, there it is. He's not talking about eating it for himself. He's not. He's an author. This is your first book?
Yep, my first book.
First time author, man. Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. So before we get into it, give me some background story on you. Born and raised, where you're from?
So I was born in Queens, raised partly in Harlem, New York, and then we moved to Long Island for most of my formative years. So grew up mostly in Long Island, New York. So native New Yorker for sure. Have moved up and down the East Coast, but also lived abroad for a number of years in Nigeria, but back in upstate New York now for my current role. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of my journey. Went to school mostly in the Northeast, Temple University, UMass Amherst, and then down south at Florida State for my doctorate. But yeah, excited to be here with you.
All right. So if growing up, did you ever think you're going to be a children's author?
So initially, no. I like to tell people the story. When I was in 5th grade, as part of our graduation, one of the things that they did was they had one of our teachers dressed up as if he was a wizard, right? As if he could forecast our future. And one of the things that he said about me is that I was going to grow up to be an author. And since my last name was Spencer, he went into suspenseful, right? They used that trope. Ever since then, it was something that was like, well, I want to write something, right? As a little kid, I was like, well, I know I want to write something. I always thought it was going to be something more like science fiction, since I tend to be more of a science fiction fan. But when the pandemic hit, I really was, kind of sat down and said, what do you want to do with a little bit extra time that you have now that you aren't, running the kids around or going out and hanging out with friends as much? You have a little bit more downtime. So how do you take advantage of this? And a kid's book seemed like the one of the best entries into the world of writing that you could take at this point.
Yeah, and then just starting it off, but who pushed you to do it? Because we hesitate. We're men. We're like, I don't know. And then it's I don't know. Who's that person went, come on?
So I guess initially it was I mentioned the idea to my wife, and she was like, okay, let's do it. Right? There was no like, no, you don't have time, right? Sometimes you hear those things of, there are all these reasons why you shouldn't engage in some things. I think I'm going to spend this time writing a book, and I told her this probably around, New Year's-ish, like, as a life goal, right? Something I want to accomplish this year. And then the pandemic hit, so it was more of a reason. I was like, well, I'm going to use some of this downtime to kind of write. and she was very supportive of that. So it's one of those things where, you know how you kind of, it's one of those things where you someone dares you to do, or you dare yourself to do something, and someone's like, all right, jump. Right. So it was that type of situation of like, well, I said I was going to do it. She didn't give me any reason not to do it. So I guess I have to do it now. Right. So I guess that was my push to keep moving forward for sure.
You're waiting for her to say, well, baby, let's think about it. You're like, okay, yeah, okay. Like, you know what I mean? But when you got somebody that really thinks that, you know, you can do anything, she challenged you.
Yes, absolutely. She definitely was like, if you say you want to do that, let's do it. Right. Like there was no excuses of why I couldn't do it. Right. So that was definitely something that was very liberating and inspiring for me to kind of start the process and move forward with it.
So then the question I have for you is, how long did it take?
So actually not as bad as I thought. Being that I self-published and kind of led that process myself, I controlled the speed of the process. So I would say I got serious by around February-ish of writing. You know, kind of dabbled in it. Then the pandemic really hit, so I had a little bit more downtime. And I probably had my first book actually printed in hand in early October, where I actually had the physical copy. So from February, there were some times where I had to, you know, being that this wasn't my full-time job, I had to take some downtime to focus on my job. I moved across country, so that was some downtime with that. But I would say from February to October, but there are times I probably could have sped it up had this been my primary role or I spent more time on it.
Okay, so you went full force. You didn't even like say slow down. You just went.
It was something where, you know, at the time in my head, at least, I didn't expect the pandemic to last so long, right? So I didn't expect us to get to a point where, you know, we're still in it, you know, and we're about to move into a new year with it. So I'm like, you know, it's going to be a few months. So take advantage of these few months while you have this downtime, because once things go back to normal, things are going to pick back up. Life happens, right? It speeds back up. So you may not have as much free time. And I've never really been one of those people where you kind of start something you really don't want to finish it type of thing. Especially something like this. I put a lot of energy and you put your blood, sweat, and tears into something like this. So you want to make sure that you complete it. So I'd rather not stall out because of something. So I originally was pushing forward because I didn't think the pandemic was going to last so long, but it gave me a little bit more runway that it did pan out. It did pan out as much as it did, unfortunately. But that was the original reason for moving so quickly through the process.
All right, so here's a couple of questions for you. I've been doing some work behind the scenes while you're talking because I want to pull this up. Who's he?
So this is the main character. His name is Chase. So he is based off of my son Chase. So they when we were designing the book, or we got to illustrations part, I made sure that the illustrator had a picture of my son as a reference point to design him. So I actually, in picking my illustrator, I tested them on a picture of him and me. So there's a picture of me and him together that's in the dedication part of the book. And I used that as a test to see if they could actually do the work that I want to. So that's Chase. He's a guy who's a young man who's very interested in fishing. It's something that runs in his family. His father is a fisherman. His grandfather is a fisherman. So it's a family tradition that he has been very excited about doing for some time, but that's the main character of this particular book.
All right. So that one's your son.
Yep.
All right. And this one?
So that's my daughter. She's not named in the book, but this character is based off of my daughter. She's 2 years old right now. So I wanted to make sure that she also felt included in the process, even though the book focuses primarily on my son's journey in this particular story. But I wanted to make sure that she felt reflected. So it's funny now that she sees that character or that illustration, she says, "Oh, that's me," right? Like she actually will refer to herself as that character. So that's also uplifting and fascinating for her to say, "Wow, you know, I'm actually in the book." So if we read through it, she'll say, "Oh, anytime we get to that page, there's a specific page where that character is a little bit more at the forefront, and she knows it's her." So that's always good to know.
So I've been doing my research, but I didn't see any about, you know, like who else is in the book that was the main characters.
So it primarily focuses around my family, right? So it's myself, my wife, Chase, who's the main character, and then my daughter, who is also in the book. So it's the four of us. It primarily centers around the father-son relationship, so it follows them most of the day. But towards the latter part of the book, you start to see the rest of the family when they return back home, and you see their family dynamics and all that there. So it centers around four characters, potentially, which are me and my family members.
And then it's a whole process. So how did you do your storyboard? Like, why did you want to do this type of book for your storyboard?
So in focusing on this book, I really wanted to, growing up, and perhaps you had the same experience, when we had children's books, you really didn't necessarily see yourself, right? You didn't see a character that looked like you in most of the books that we read as a young child, right? If you think about some of the books, either the characters were not people of color or they were animals, right? So when it comes to that, as a child growing up, I think that sends a subliminal message, right? That you don't ever see yourself reflected. Simultaneously with that, I wanted the book to also have a message. So for me growing up with my father, a lot of times the life lessons were very subtle, right? They weren't like in your face, like don't do drugs. It was usually he tied in those type of messages into things that were already happening, and he just took advantage of that opportunity to teach you something. So I wanted that to happen in this book, where it was a typical experience between a father and son, but it could be anyone, like a father and daughter, or mother and daughter, or whatever. But it has underlying messaging for the the children that read it, right? And mainly, about patience, anger management, about learning a new skill, about having a positive relationship with your parents. So all those messages are tied into it, but it's done in a non-preachy way. So it's telling them or educating them on things that will help them in life without preaching to them. With the process, it was one of those things where it was a lot of iterations of rewriting and writing the story, right? What do I want to convey? How do I want to highlight these things? Who is my audience, right? So I think it's important for both people of color, kids of color, and non-kids of color to see a protagonist of color, right? To see them at the forefront of the book. So I think that was something that I really focused on. And then in developing the timeline, I just based it off of, trips of my own son with fishing, and then my experiences with my father, right? The idea that you could potentially go through and just have a normal experience with your family, right? And just do a family gathering and enjoy yourself, right? But also get something out of that experience that works extremely well. So that's kind of the process I went through. And then I found an illustrator who really showed me that she could do the work. I was really looking for more of that cartoony kind of look.
Yeah.
So I actually was able to find her on Instagram, oddly, right? Social media was my outlet for her. And the way that I did is I looked at a lot of books of other authors that I when you go through this process, you look at other children's books to kind of get a feel of what you're looking for. Yeah. And I really focused on a specific type, and then looked at different illustrators that others had used. And sometimes those people, if the book is really good, they become really expensive. So you try to find other people who are like them and maybe up and coming or want a chance. And she was one of those individuals, and was a great person to work with. And I really appreciated that she was able to accommodate my vision when it came to the storyboards and everything. And it's a process. You kind of go through it several different times before you get to the final product.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to introduce the star of the show, and we'll do that right when we come back. CMJ Entertainment is a one-stop shop. CMJ Entertainment helps people do any type of events, and it's a marketing tool as well. So we'll cover everything from start to finish. If it's a wedding, we'll make sure your wedding is over the top. And if it's an event, we make sure that everybody gets information at the end of the day. Give us a call at 416-414-8964 or online, go to cmjent.com. Yeah. Yes, we're back with first-time author right there. Looking at, and I said to you before we went to break, I said to everybody, we're going to bring the star of the show, and I think I even kind of threw you off, didn't I?
Yeah, a little bit. I'll admit.
That's what I love doing to my guests. All right, so correct me if I'm wrong. Who's this right there?
Oh, that's my son Chase. So that's the main character who the main character is based off of, and that's one of our experiences of fishing here in upstate. He has a very close friend who also goes fishing. So when it's not as cold, we try to get them together, and they can go fishing for hours and hours and hours and not be bored. So it's a blessing to be able to have such an activity that's positive, but also teaches a lot of skills in general, just generally patience and different things that go along with fishing. So that's one of our experiences up here.
There you go. There you go. Listen, we can't talk about him if we can't see him. You know what I mean? That's what I'm calling the star of the show right there.
So yes, he's definitely the star. He's a great kid. I couldn't have asked for a better son.
All right. So let me curve this interview a little bit.
Okay.
How do you feel as a father writing this book and then putting it out?
So it is definitely one of the highlights of being a father at this point in my life, to be able to create something from scratch and to actively involve your children. So one of the benefits of writing about my son, he's at an age where he can read, is that I can test the book on him, right? To be able to say, do you understand this word, right? As an adult, sometimes we use words that kids they're not so sure about, or working in certain environments that you use words that are far too big for them. So going back and forth, he was a test person for that, which is why he's also listed as one of the editors in the book, because he actually read through the book and was able to help me with that. But it's also a proud moment to in a few weeks, I hope to also be able to read at his school. Right, so he'll be able to say to I think it's kindergarten through third grade, we'll be working with, and actually be able to say, this is my dad's book and I'm in it, right? That I'm the character in my dad's book. So I think that's also a very uplifting experience for him, and it makes me proud to be able to do that. It's also great for your kids to kind of see you go through that process, right, of actually creating something that he was a part of and could see, and then see the process of, hey, a few months ago, Dad was having me read this manuscript, and then now I have a hard copy of the book in my hands, right? That you actually can see the finished product. So I think that is also on a different level of showing that you can create something, right? I think especially with a lot of younger kids, it's important to show them that they can create, right? I think that's one of the most valuable skill sets that you can teach any young persons, right? That you don't have to always be a consumer, right? That you can always create something if you're interested in it. And maybe at one point in the future, he might even want to say, Dad, let's sit down and write our own book, right? Like, let's actually sit down together and we can work through that process, and he will have that opportunity. I think it's important to also build that entrepreneurial component into kids, right? So, a lot of times I refer to myself as an authorpreneur, but that's kind of the skill set that I want to do with him. And then also, as I mentioned before, having your daughter be able to recognize herself in the book as a 2-year-old, right? To say, oh, that's me. They also, I believe, will read it at her daycare. Right, so that'll be another component of where she gets to say, "Oh, that's me in the book," and they read the book about my brother at our daycare. So that's definitely one of the highlights of being a father at this point in my life. Of course, there are different life points where you're very excited, or are milestones in any parent's life. But this is one of the things that I think will stay with me for a while.
Well, listen, the main thing you said right there is the entrepreneurial side. Show our young men and women that we can be bosses. So I love that, you brought him into the fold. You brought him in as well and said, the whole family, and showed them, listen, anything we put our mind to, we can produce something. And here's something tangible in our hands that we did together that you can keep. And then think of what I love it even more. They can pass it on to their kids, and it could be a book that'll go for generation to generation. Like if they, I'm telling you, saran wrap that sucker, freeze dry it, do what you got to do. But I just think that's phenomenal, and congratulations on that. So this is what we need to do, though. We need to buy this book. So if you see on the bottom of the ticker right there, it's in the description as well. I put it in the link. I put it in the chat. That's where you can, support, and support some more. Go into the hyperlink and grab that book. Listen, my friend, thank you so much for taking the time to come on my show. Before I let you go, shout outs.
Yes. So I want to definitely shout out my wife, Jay, who has been a rock for me throughout the time we've been together, but also specifically with this process. She must have read and reread my book probably 1,000 times at this point. So I really want to shout her out for her support. Of course, Chase, who is the inspiration for the book, but also helped with making the book possible by, editing, and, he'll tell me if certain pictures looked funny or different things that were, that help you better prepare the book for a kid audience. And then the rest of my family, they were extremely excited and proud of me from the moment I told them I was writing a book, as they saw me go through the process. But even, of course, they were my first customers when the book came out. So I want to shout out my family and friends, and the people back home where I grew up in Long Island. They were very supportive. A lot of my peers who I went to school with, they bought the book. So I just really am and taken back by how much support and love that I've received. So I want to shout out everyone who has been with me on this journey and has supported us in this book in particular.
All right, my friend. Be blessed. Take care. And congratulations on your first book. There it is.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it, Chuck.
Not a problem, my friend. You take care.
You too.
All right. Real simple. Support. All right. I think this is going to be something great. And I love that it's a legacy for his children. So all you need to do is support. The ticker is right there. Make sure you go on. It's in the description. Like I tell everybody, you didn't have to watch, but I'm glad that you did. Thank you so much. This is what you need to do. It's a father and son book. So all the fathers out there, pick up the phone, call your sons, text your sons and say, hey, I love you. All right. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Has come to an end. But the fun doesn't have to stop here. If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback, head over right now to Twitter and Facebook and like, share, and get involved. Join us next time.
Please be advised that this podcast is meant for educational and informational purposes only and is in no way a replacement for legal or medical advice. The opinions contained within are solely those of the interviewers and interviewees and should be received as so. Those seeking help or advice are encouraged to obtain professional legal and medical service.